So, nearby Brad and Nisha, we're going to be talking about something we're all probably a bit familiar with today, and that is Lorem Ipsum.
What's that?
So yeah, as I mentioned, we're talking about Lorem Ipsum today.
Who's she? Who's Lorem Ipsum? She's a friend of yours.
You're trying to trigger me now that I'm on camera, I see. Playing that game. But yeah, like, if anyone doesn't know, it's kind of just a general placeholder
She's
text.
a general?
God damn it, Brad. God damn it. Lorem Ipsum is text, Brad, not person.
Texter.
Lorem Ipsum.
Sorry, I'll let you finish the first sentence.
At least let me get through that, yes. Yeah, so Lorem Ipsum is basically just is placeholder text that is used generally if like you're making mock-ups for like, you know, graphics and things like that. And Brad is stepping away so that he can pass.
No, I wanted Nish to move close to the mic.
But I presume we're all familiar with it quite well because of like, you know, whenever we're using editing software, if you want to use text, it will always come up like Lorem Ipsum. And essentially, like, it doesn't particularly mean anything, even though it can be roughly translated. It's essentially just scrambled Latin text. I can read, but I'm just going to need to remember, like, use my phone for this one. So it's probably based upon Cicero's De Finibus Bonorum a Malorum.
Who's Cicero?
I don't know. It basically insinuates that the origins might go all the way back to the 1500s, and that's where like potentially the first uses of it are. However, like looking into it, even on like the official like website for Lorem Ipsum or the research of it, like no one's actually sure, and it might be as like late as like the 1910s that it was actually invented.
But this is all before computer processing. So
Exactly, yeah.
people used to write it out.
Yes.
Oh no.
People used to write it out, and like that's how old it is, and for somehow it's managed to get through like, you know, all of like typing and computer software and stuff, and just like been that effective that it's still used to this day.
I see it quite regular because when I'm using Photoshop, when I try and click on the text layer, I accidentally create a new layer.
Yeah.
Click off it, it's like Lorem Ipsum in like massive layers. I'm like, for God's sake.
Yeah, so there is like a massive string of fake text that is like, you know, it follows on. It's like just starts with Lorem Ipsum, and that's generally what it's referred to as. But yeah, people aren't entirely sure of the origins, but it's definitely like, you know, predicates just most of like technology that we use for writing, which is kind of ridiculous. I just assumed it was like something people had come up with like, you know, recently with like graphics work and stuff like that.
It also makes me think about when we were doing like the bio stuff for Patreon. And everyone had filled in their about me bit, and I hadn't, and it filled itself in with the Lorem Ipsum, and you just thought I'd like written in a different language.
It didn't fill itself in. I put it there.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Brad
okay.
did it.
So that was the first time I had noticed Lorem Ipsum. But then the moment you mentioned, like, oh, it's placeholder text, I was like, oh, yeah, I've seen that whenever I click text on, like, Adobe and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was personally the first time I'd ever, like, come into contact and acknowledged its presence kind of thing. But most of the time it's that good at just seeming like random gobbled text that you're not really paying attention to it. It just, when it was like meant to be a bio about Nisha, and I was like, why is she writing it in Latin? What is going on?
It's just who she is.
Secret language that even though I knew how to say Latin, but yeah, it's just placeholder. I'm like, sure, like you use Photoshop, don't you? Surely you would have seen it like
I have,
more
but,
occasionally. Like
I just until that point I never
didn't,
really
like,
clicked
think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's a sign that it works. But do you guys know like why it was invented?
No. I'm trying to think like.
I mean, it's placeholder text.
Yes.
Was it not invented as...
It was invented to be placeholder text.
Oh, well, I do know then.
Do you know why?
It's like, why?
Was it because there was a space that they needed some text in, but they didn't have any text to put in it, so they used this as a placeholder?
Kind of, but essentially the reason that it exists is because when people were showing examples of like, you know, document layouts and stuff, presumably it would be like for newspapers or whatever, you know, I'm not quite sure exactly what the uses would be, but any example text that was written doesn't matter what it was, people would focus on the words in the text and not the layout of any document. So they essentially had to use Lorem Ipsum to distract people, because if you say, for example, you're making, a document for a business client, and you have just some rough information about like the business or the client in that text as like example text, and you tell them, don't worry, that's just example text there. Every single time, people will critique the text and not the document, not the layout, not the graphics. They will specifically read and critique the text.
Now, I don't consider myself to be better than all of mankind, but I'm pretty sure that I would be able to look at a document's layout and disregard the text.
I mean, you would think so, yeah, but it's, not every single person in the world is going to
be like
ignore
you,
the fact
Brad.
Ignore the fact that it's example text, but yeah, it's prevalent enough where someone had to come up with a solution, because people kept being morons and being like, this example text isn't very good.
Yeah, I've seen the examples that you mean. Like, there's been times where I wanted to design my own website. You get the website templates and it'll have like a couple of lines that make sense, and then just start saying Lorem Ipsum. You say, yeah, it makes sense because it's just showing you the layout of what it will look like.
Mm-hmm.
The big question is, because I imagine you might end up editing this one because you're in it.
Yes.
Will you take the time to replace the text wall with Lorem Ipsum?
We'll see how close to the line I want to edit this one. If I'm in here the day before the video is meant to go live, shit, I need to edit this one, then probably not.
Because not only would you have to replace the text wall, you would also have to add back in all of our patrons.
Exactly, yeah.
Who have paid for the privilege of appearing in the background.
And as well, we have, I believe, by now the time the video has gone out, added more people to that tier. So that means that if you would like to see your name, hopefully around me or whoever is presenting the video, you can essentially, for at least a month, get your name in there via our Patreon tier, and it's the background tier, I believe.
Background extras.
Background extras tier. Thank you very much. But yeah, so if you'd like to see yourself in the video, and you can use nicknames, you can see there's some silly names and stuff hidden in there. So yeah, if you would like to participate in the video in a little way, then you can go to our Patreon and figure out from there.
What a natural plug.
Well, it was natural until you decided to point out what a natural plug.
If we don't point it out, then other people will be like, oh, we're doing a plug. But now we're aware of it, which means that it's not.
So now we've got to go meta with the plugs.
I have one more question, though.
Yes.
Who is Lauren?
Well, if you know who Lauren is, then leave a comment down below and let us know.